This week's episode of Fireside is brought to you by Legends of Belize and Wonders Oddities Expo.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to Fireside Paranormal Podcast. My name is Jordan Cline, and we just got to our Halloween episode. We are finally here. I'm here with my wife, Sarah.
Hey, everybody.
We are so excited to get this going. We got a lot of stories for y'all today. Before we get into it, just a couple announcements.
Legends of Belize is a series about mythical creatures that dwell in the jungles and waters of Belize. The Belizean legends are captured, documented, and preserved like never before in a comprehensive art series and books with fully colored and detailed images of fine art by artists, authors, and award-winning animators Dismas and Grissi G. Discover the supernatural creatures that await deep in the jungles, such as the mysterious dwarf called Tata Duende with backwards feet known to rip the thumbs off of trespassers, or the beautiful shape-shifting woman known to locals as the Ishtabai, who seduces drunks to never be seen again. These creatures and many more can be found in the Legends of Belize books. Learn about the cryptozoological, paranormal, and unexplained creatures that haunt Belize. Be fascinated, be terrified, Belize. Legend of Belize books are available in print and ebook. Buy your copy from your favorite online bookstore such as Amazon, KDP, Apple Books, and many more. Also be sure to visit legendsofbelize.com.
Also coming up, December 3rd and 4th, the Wonders Oddities Expo and the Tri-State Exotic Animal Expo are again joining forces at the Moundsville State Penitentiary. There's going to be donations for the Caring Tree for Kids. There's going to be door prizes all day long with paid admission. There's going to be free pictures with Krampus. Now, the hours, December 3rd is going to be 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., Sunday 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and admission is $10. Kids 12 and under are free. The deadline for voting for the Owly Award with American Paranormal Magazine is tonight. So go to paranormalzine.com, cast your vote, hopefully for yours truly, and let's see who wins.
The Halloween episode is always my favorite to join Jordan on because I love hearing your stories. I love giving you guys a chance to voice your experiences. It's such a fun time. Our very first story comes in from past guest Ron Murphy.
All right, my name is Ron Murphy. My website could be found on www.ronmurphyjr.com or on Facebook, which is a good way to find me as well too, Ronald Murphy. And so this is going to be the Halloween episode, correct? So this will be something I'll talk about that actually happened, curiously enough, around Halloween. So I've been in education for most of my adult life. And one day the principal asked that if I would take a group of the teachers from the school on a Halloween ghost walk. And I thought, well, that sounds like fun, taking a lot of middle-aged women out into the woods. But some young teacher met me in the hall and she said, "Hey, Mr. Murphy, I heard you're going to take us on a ghost tour." And I said, "Yes, of course I am." So I wanted to look good, so I got myself a brand new scarf. I was dressed to the T's for winter, and so we joined up together, and I took them to a place where there was a rumor that a witch in the 1700s was burned at the stake. Actually, the way the legend goes is that in 1789, the crops started to fail, children were being born stillborn, and it wasn't a good time for the villagers, and it also wasn't a good time to be a witch. So the witch actually had to be to blame. So the folklore goes that the townspeople gathered her up and burned her at the stake, because that's the best way to get rid of witches. But she said, to the townspeople that 100 years from that date, she would send enough water to quench the flames that were consuming her. And lo and behold, 100 years of that day, the Johnstown flood came and wiped out the town in which she had said that this was going to happen. So this is where I took the group of teachers. I thought that this would be a great place to get scared. I told them the story of the witch. I showed them some pretty interesting historic graves down there as well. And then I took them to a tunnel. It was an old railroad tunnel at the end of the trail, about a mile and a half down. I thought, this is going to be great. This is going to really increase my street cred, They're going to be scared. So I went down to the bridge and down to the old abandoned train tunnel, and a group of the teachers went in, and I saw through the camera lens, I couldn't see this with my naked eye, but I saw through the camera lens that there were orbs that were circling them. At first I thought it was dust, but then it appeared as if the orbs themselves were evaluating the people that were in there. It came to the point that one of these orbs actually alighted over one of the teachers' faces, and in multiple shots, the orb was distorting her face. You couldn't even see through it. Yeah, so this was pretty bizarre. And the teachers that were inside the tunnel, they said that they could feel something strange happening to them. The idea of cold spots or what happened, but that there was something in that tunnel that made them say, it's time to get out of the tunnel. Yeah. So by this time it was pitch black. We started to walk up the trail, and towards the end of the trail where we were parked, there were these little points of light, green, blues, reds, that were looking like they were almost hopscotching across the trail. I thought, this is very, very strange. So I had no idea what to make of this. Nobody else knew what to make of it as well, too, but people started to get scared. And as we began to run towards our car, a great cacophony of noises started to arise from the woods. It sounded as if there was a lot of people screaming at one time. This was one of the most scary events that I've ever been on. And we get back to our car. One of the teachers says, I feel this pain. She lifts up her shirt, and she had 3 scratches on her. Oh, wow. Yeah. So already this is an evening not to forget, okay? And then, so I get back in the car. I start adjusting myself, and I noticed that gosh darn scarf of mine that I just bought has now been gone. So it's a little scary, right? Yeah. So we all didn't know what to make of this. We met afterwards at a restaurant to kind of talk about what was going on. It was one of those kind of uneasy quietness when we all got together, because we really didn't know what to make of the night. But we said our goodbyes, and I went back home. I had locked my front door to the house, and I opened up the door, and immediately I jumped back, because now this is true story. It doesn't sound, but it gives me goosebumps thinking about this right now. I jumped back because my stove has every burner ignited. Now, remember, we were going to go track a witch that was supposedly burned at the stake. Now, you have to understand, too, I also have 5 kids, and they can be kind of knuckleheads. So it's possible, let's put it that way. So I built up enough courage to go in. I turned off the stove, went to the living room to hang up my coat, and my scarf was there. Yeah. True story, guys. True story. Wow. That's probably the most fascinating tale that I've ever had happen around Halloween. And this was specifically for a Halloween ghost adventure that turned out really, really kind of bizarre. So that is amazing. That is. Yeah. Thank you very much. Hey, thank you very much, my friend. Yeah.
When Ron was talking about his scarf, it reminded me of that old story. Oh, Sarah, what were those books called? The not Are You Afraid of the Dark? Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. You remember the story with the little girl with the green ribbon around her neck? Yeah,
I do. I remember that because she was hiding her cut. She was decapitated and she was hiding it.
Yeah, when she took the scarf off, her head fell off. Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of when he said that.
Hi, my name is Sam Maskery. I am the owner and artist of Cottage and Coven, and you can find me on social media and Etsy under that name. So I have a scary story about using a Ouija board when I was younger.
All right.
So my sister got a Ouija board for Christmas, and it was glow in the dark, so we took it into the darkest room of our house. And it was my sister, my brother, and me. And I refused to touch it because I was like, I don't want to be haunted for the rest of my life. But my sister and brother were going to operate the little planchette, I think is what it's called. So they were going to operate the Ouija board. And I was going to sit there and think of words for the ghost to guess for me. So I was like, I'll be the unobjective party. Oh, yeah. I'm not touching it. I'm not controlling it. So we're in there and we're having it we get a hook. We get a ghost on the hook. And and so my sister, my sister's like, okay, hello, like, how are you today and stuff. And then we're like, okay, so Sam here, who's me, is going to think of a word and you tell us what she's thinking. So I'm thinking cat. And the ghost spells out cat. So we're all freaking out. And so we're all like, I'm like crying at this point because I'm a baby. I'm like, oh my God, it knows. And then we hear a cat purring in the room with us. And we did have cats at my parents' house at this time. So we're like, are you making that cat purr? And it says, yes. So we fly out of the room. We're all like, we run to the kitchen. All of our cats are in the kitchen. There was no cat in the room with us. And anytime, it's our guest room at my parents' house. Anytime I have to stay in that room, I have nightmares guaranteed.
You volunteer to stay in that room after?
Not voluntarily, but sometimes you just get the like short end of the stick when everyone's home and you have no place to stay but the scary guest room.
I'm sleeping on the floor, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Normally, anything glow in the dark is automatically like 10 times cooler, but you still would not catch me anywhere near a Ouija board, no matter what.
What gets me is the room that she doesn't want to go into. So I don't know if you know this, but my dear sweet stepmom, she had this room that was full of those porcelain dolls. And you know those dolls that, like, I don't know, I guess they're only for display, but their eyes, no matter where you go in the room, they always follow you. So she had this room, and it was like the guest bedroom, but she just kept all of the dolls in there, and everybody who came in was terrified to just sleep in that house because anytime you woke up, like 50 dolls are just staring at you, staring you down.
My name's Tina Vagnosi. I'm with Rogue Paranormal and Seekers of Spirits, based out of Ohio. And we were at the Twin Cities Opera House in McConnellsville, Ohio last night. And we were conducting an EVP session upstairs on the catwalk. And we kept hearing noises over against the one wall. And we flipped on the flashlight. There was nothing there. We couldn't debunk anything.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden we turned the flashlight off. And you could plain as day hear.
Oh, really?
Nobody else was there. It was just the four of us. And also we were down in the basement doing an EVP session. And there was the three of us downstairs. There was only one person upstairs. She was in the auditorium section. And it sounded like somebody turned on a radio. At first it sounded like whenever you turn on a spirit box, it has that raspy. Then you could hear music playing. We thought it was Amy upstairs. So we walked back upstairs and she says, "Did you guys turn on a radio?" We said, "No, we thought maybe it was you." It was very, very active last night.
And where's the Twin Cities Opera House? Where's that at?
McConnellsville, Ohio.
McConnellsville, Ohio. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tina. I love all these stories. This next one comes in from Jennifer.
So, no, my name's Jen, and when I was 15 years old, my parents bought a house in the north side in Manchester area, Pittsburgh, and there actually was a story that there were 3 women that lived in the house. It was a family house, so this is the first time the house was not in the family anymore, and there was a room on the 3rd floor. It was a big house. It had like a butler's pantry going down the back hallway, and
That's cool.
And it had 7 marble fireplaces in it, and they were renovating the place. It was massive. It was basically, it could have been 3 big apartments in this big house. It was big pocket doors. It was a really cool place. Anyway, there was a room on the 3rd floor, which I had one bedroom on one end, and my brother had the other bedroom on the other end, and then there was a full bathroom, and there was a room in between our rooms. There was never any heat in that room. They had many furnace HVAC people coming in. They could not figure out why that room would never warm up. There was an old bed frame in there from a long time ago. Like, we went in there maybe 2 times, and we never went in there again. Now, my bedroom up there had a latch key, like a latch from the inside. From inside of my bedroom, so I could like lock it at night. Just a lot of times at night, when in the morning, it would be open. I don't know what that was about. But my mom did tell me that she saw several spirits in the house and things like that. She said some of the Yost sisters who she had talked to before they bought, after they bought the house, these were older women, said that a few of the family members had died there. So one night I was downstairs in the living room by myself, and I felt something, and I looked, and about 15 feet from where I was, there was I guess she was a spirit. She was dressed, she had like a lacy dress on, and her hair was pulled up in a bun, and she had her arms crossed, and she looked at me. It still freaks me out. This was a long, long time ago, like 40 years ago. And then she went up the steps, and where the back steps were for the butlers and, the people that used to do that kind of work in the house, there was a curtain. The curtain moved. So she went up there and went down the steps. And that is the only time I have ever seen anything like that. And I was not afraid, but most people don't believe me when I tell them the story. And I was not under the influence of anything when it happened. But that's my experience. And that was 41 years ago. So
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This is Emma's story. I grew up in the West Midlands, UK, in a small village in South Staffordshire. The village itself and surrounding areas are very old and full of history dating back to the Doomsday Book. I believe the age and history of the area may have been the cause to some of the activity we experienced in the house I grew up in. From visual sightings to poltergeist activity, we had it all. However, there is one particular story from this house that haunts me to this day. This is the story about Mary. When I was a baby, I used to interact with something from my cot that no one else could see. And when I was a little older, I would play with someone that wasn't there. I used to refer to her as Mary. I don't feel she was a bad spirit, but I do think that she was unhappy. There was one story about a time that she tried to make me do something that would have caused serious injury to myself, if not worse. I would play with her most days and remember her being around me a lot. Every morning I would wake up and she would be there by my bed looking straight at me. She wasn't solid like a human, she was more translucent, and the only feature that I could not see properly were her eyes. However, I knew she was looking straight at me. When I was younger, I didn't mind her being by my bed, as I was really just used to her being around, and I didn't think anything about it as being weird or not normal. It wasn't until I was older that I realized that Mary was not of this world. Every morning I would wake up before anyone else was awake and would have this feeling as if someone was standing next to me. It was like she was purposely waking me up. I actually shared my bedroom with my sister, and she never saw her or woke up when this was happening. In fact, no one ever saw her or heard her apart from myself until one of the last days we owned the house. Anyway, as I was saying, she would be by my bed every morning, but as I grew older, I became more aware of what was happening and that this was not normal, and it really became frightening. So when I would wake up in the morning, I would not speak or interact with her. Instead, I would hide under my covers until I couldn't breathe, and then when I would reappear from under my covers, she would be gone. This went on until I was about 9, when I woke up one day and she was not there. It stayed that way for a while until around 11, and she started to reappear by my bedside every morning. Once again, I got into the routine of hiding under my covers and staying there until I couldn't any longer. This trick still worked, and she would be gone when I reappeared. However, one morning I woke up to the familiar sight, but today it was different. I did the usual hiding under the covers, but when I came out for air, Mary was still there, closer than before, and staring straight at me. Right away, I jumped under the covers again and yelled out at her to leave me alone and that I didn't want to see her again. I was more frightened than ever because this time she wasn't going anywhere, and it was as if she was trying to tell me that she was not leaving. I stayed under the covers longer than I ever had, and I was so scared to come out in case she was still there. However, that was the very last time I saw her. She listened to my wishes and didn't show herself to me again. Things still happened to me, and some of these events I feel were caused by Mary, but I never physically saw her again. Something in my gut tells me she was the reason behind some things. When we were moving from that house, she also made herself known to my mom and her friend when they were walking up the stairs as a creepy voice came from my old bedroom, calling out my name. I wish I could buy this house again, as so much happened there. This is part of why I believe in the paranormal, and also the reason I'm starting my own podcast, as a lot of my experiences happened in that house.
This story comes in from Chris. This may not be the most overtly ghost story, but it's the closest I've got, and I felt scared. About 10 years ago, in late fall, I took the dog out in the backyard to pee before bed, as usual. I remember I was wearing medical scrub pants and a hoodie. It was just chilly enough that I was wishing I wore socks as well as my slippers, but for a quick trip out with the dog, it was fine. The dog was running around and sniffing stuff, as usual. Then I started to feel cold. Very cold. I was literally shaking to a degree that would have made a casual onlooker think I had a medical issue of some kind. If I'd been holding milk, it would have become butter. I would have thought some Arctic air made its way down to New York from Canada, except for what the dog did. He ran to me, pushed his butt against my leg, and started growling towards the other end of the yard. He was intently focused on one particular corner of the yard that was empty. Except for the cable guy and the mail lady, this dog didn't growl at anyone or anything. Yet, there he was, in a protective stance, growling at seemingly nothing while I darn near convulsed. As if to prove that there were more happening than I can see, both the shivering and the growling stopped at the exact same time. The dog stayed close, but dropped his protective stance. So, that was the time my dog protected me from a Harry Potter-esque dementor. Also, plug my podcast, Spoil My Movie. All platform links available at deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
So my name is Alicia. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my story actually happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota in March of 2017.
Okay.
So heart's beating fast. So it was actually a conference for pagans called PaganaCon. It was a 3-day event. It was really cool. Had a lot of fun. Had a lot of really cool experiences and just grew in my own spiritual path. And then the last night we got back to the Airbnb and everything was fine. Like we went to bed like we had the past 3 nights, and the Airbnb didn't feel like anything was funky. And then the middle of the night, I woke up because I felt like I was laying this way. I felt pressure on the bed, like right by my head.
Oh, wow.
Like I felt it sit. And so I thought my friend who I had gone with, like she was on the other side of the room. I thought she was just like coming to sit on the bed. And so I opened my eyes to look at her, and there is the silhouette of a woman sitting there on the bed. And like I can see the outline of her, and she had her like a head wrap. And I could just see the outline of her against the window. And I didn't see her smile. I felt her smile.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then she picked up her hand and put it on my arm, and I felt like flesh.
So it felt like a hand.
Yes. At which point I started to scream, as one does. And that woke my friend up because she screams too. And for like a good 2 minutes, for like it breaks the tension a little bit. You know, we're both laughing,
just screaming at each other in
right.
the middle of the night.
In the Airbnb, no one comes running, thank God. But so she turns the lights on, and like she gets on her computer, sitting on her bed across the room. So we're just like up since I'm freaked out still. And a good 5 minutes pass or something, and then I suddenly can't move. Like I'm wide awake. And
now, this is after you've been awake.
This is after I've been awake. After we've both been awake. The lights are on. We've been awake because I was freaked out. And I felt like this. I felt this pressure, and then suddenly I can't move to the point where like it feels like my jaw is locked together, and I'm trying to call out across the room to my friend, and she cannot hear me. And this goes on for a full like 2 minutes of just not being able to move and feeling the pressure of like feeling this thing there, and not able to like get my friend's attention. Finally, I was able to wrench my jaw open, and I was just like, and I yelled her name, and like she was like, "What's wrong?" She's like, "What's wrong?" It's like, I can't get off the bed. Like there is something keeping me from getting off the bed. I can't get off the bed. And she comes over, and she can't feel or sense anything, even though we're both sensitive. We that's how we became friends. And so she just sits there with me until I fall asleep, and I've got like amethyst clutched in my fist, and I just. When I woke up the next morning, my hand was still clutched around the amethyst. Like my hand was cramped around it. And I can honestly say, like it was the most scared I have ever been in my life. And I've had a lot of paranormal experiences, but that's like
a physical attack.
Yes. It was very much a sensation. Yes, it was very much this sensation of I can do whatever I want to you, and there is nothing you can do about it.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's my story.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Marlon. I'm from here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or the Mon Valley area of Pittsburgh.
Nice.
And I'm going to share a ghost story that I had in Clareton, Pennsylvania, where my grandmother lived for the time being. I was about 8 years old or so, so this is a famous story I tell my students because I'm a teacher.
Okay.
It usually scares them. Still scares me. So anyway, I spending the night over at her house with my aunt, and at the time, my brother and sister who were younger than me, about 2 years or so, and then my cousins who were still babies. My younger brother is 4 years younger than me. So I was about 8, and they were about 4. My mother, family, they went on a cruise or something. I can't remember where they were. So I had to be babysat by my aunt at the house. Grandmother's house always used to scare me anyway. My grandmother used to scare me, to be honest. She was not a pleasant person, really. But so I'm sleeping upstairs. My aunt's on one side in the room. And I wake up middle of the night because I hear the rocking chair in that room was rocking. So there's a rocking chair in there, and I'm hear it. And I'm like, right on time.
Right?
Yeah. So I'm sitting here as an 8-year-old, I'm thinking to myself, my aunt's right here, who's in that chair making this noise. Couple moments go by, and I'm thinking, should I look or should I just ignore it and go back to sleep? Well, curiosity got the cat. I looked up, and there was this dark thing sitting in the chair. It had no head. It was so dark, but I could still see that it was dark. Okay, so I remember it had no head, and I remember vividly how its hands were curled on the armrest. On the chair. I remember it just, the thing had a long coat on and boots. Of course, I was scared. Lay back down. I wish I hadn't have looked. Rocking stopped. Then I heard heavy footsteps coming towards the bed, towards my side of the bed. Very heavy footsteps, you know. I don't know if you can hear this. I mean, it was heavy. And the thing just walked right over the bed and stood there right over me.
Wow.
And I was terrified. I tried to squeeze into my aunt. She was laying there sleeping. Everybody. I was the only one to see this. I had covered my head with the blankets thinking it would go away. Took the blankets off it gives me the creeps still thinking about it. It was still there. And eventually, I just was so frightened, I just kind of froze. I thought it was going to grab me or something. So, yeah, that's my story, man.
Wow.
I woke up. I went back to sleep, told everybody. They all said it was somebody was messing with me and this and that. But just I'll close it out. But when my grandmother passed and other people stayed in that house, weird stuff happened to them, too. The house
Really?
still over there in Clareton, Pennsylvania, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Thank you for that. Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
This is a story that has come in from a listener who has asked to remain anonymous. My husband and I were staying with his family to save money, and this happened around 2 months after our arrival. I found out after this story that my husband's grandfather passed away on August 25th, 2006. My son woke up crying loudly. I don't remember if I woke up first or if he woke me up by crying. I remember seeing that it was 12:05 a.m. My husband and I tried to console him, diaper changed and offered a bottle that he didn't want. Eventually, we turned off the light and tried to lay him down, but he screamed continuously. It wasn't his hungry or wanting to snuggle cry, and I thought that was weird. A few moments later, as we were laying in the dark with my son still screaming, I got an overwhelming feeling that I was being stared at. It was so overwhelming that I even scooted myself closer to the center of the bed because I really felt like something was just right there next to me, staring intently. All at once, I felt that whatever was watching me realized that I was watching it too. That's when it got very strange for me, and I felt with every cell in my body that I knew what and who this was watching me. By now, my son was still crying, though slightly less, and my husband was snoring. I decided to act on my feeling and Google someone. I Googled my husband's grandfather's name. Immediately, a Statesman Journal legacy piece with his obituary popped up. I read it, and at the bottom, I realized that he had passed away in August. I did not know this before, and I still don't know the exact day, as the article didn't say. But as soon as I made that connection, I got a feeling that didn't feel like it was my own. I felt an overwhelming relief, like a sigh of, oh, thank goodness someone has finally figured it out. Or something, but it was definitely relief. This feeling was followed by a feeling that felt like an apology. My mom instincts, and yes, those are real, told me that this was an apology for scaring my son. This made sense to me, as I mentioned earlier, because my son's cry was different. It wasn't his hungry cry, and it wasn't his cuddling cry. So scaring him fit perfectly. But I'm also well aware that for some reason my child has always been terrified of the elderly, so I don't think the scare was intentional. I then saw a white anomaly moving around the room in front of the fireplace. At this point, I really felt that I knew what and who this was, and I felt like it wasn't an experience for me. So I woke up my husband. I was overcome with emotion and was crying, but I didn't feel like it was actually me crying. I told my husband what had happened, and my son's crying is getting louder again. My husband's grandmother knocks on the door because her son is still crying, but my husband says, "It's okay, we've got it," and she leaves. My husband then tells me about the day his grandfather passed away, and how he and his brother were very young, and so they went somewhere else while others gathered to have a final moment with their grandfather, and that he was later told that his grandpa asked for him and his brother and wanted to tell them something but didn't get to. As my husband was telling me this, I again became overwhelmed and cried, tears that I felt that weren't mine. All I kept feeling was that their grandpa wanted to say, "I love you." So I told my husband that's what I felt like he wanted to say, and that too turned into a feeling of relief. My son is still crying and doesn't want to be on the bed. So my husband stands up and asks me to start taking photos. I do, and in 2 of these, there's an anomaly that looks exactly like the one I had seen earlier. This time, the anomaly is on the bed. My husband and I go over things more, and I tell him that I feel like he, meaning his grandpa, is trying to tell him things that will be okay, and that he loves him and he just wanted to check on his great-grandson. I became overwhelmed with feelings of longing, regret, relief, and a love that just ached. But again, it just was like those feelings were not from me. I told my husband, maybe you should acknowledge him. So he did, and I don't know what he said, but as soon as he acknowledged him, my son immediately calmed down, went to sleep, and all of the emotions I had been feeling left. While I've had other experiences that I consider to be paranormal, I have never experienced anything like this before in my life.
This story comes in from past guest Nick Pease. A year or so ago, I woke up in the early hours to find the spirit of a dear musician friend standing beside my bed. She had passed away quite suddenly just a few years before. She was smiling beautifully at me and exuding pure love and serenity. I was fully awake and filled with joy as I reached out to try to gently take her hand, but in that moment she disappeared. It was one of the most magical, uplifting experiences of my life. Best wishes, Nick. Nick is also the author of the spiritual life after death thriller Revelation. You can check him out on Instagram.
The House on Sheldon Flats. I've lived in 2 haunted homes in my life. I've told people before that there is a distinct difference to living in a regular home versus living in a haunted home. I lived in plenty of regular homes growing up. We moved a lot. I had plenty of chances to assess. But I also lived in 2 haunted homes. Stark contrasts. I'll tell you about one of them. The drive to get to this place took you far out of town and winding through miles of forest. The trees themselves had been thinned with logging, so you could see through the trees, just not to the end of them, like staring at the never-ending ocean. There's always been something so spooky about the forest for me. I had been deathly afraid of bears ever since moving to Montana, had had many graphic nightmares of them attacking me by the time we moved out to our remote home on Sheldon Flats. Once through the trees, you would take a sharp turn into the clearing. Houses took up where the trees left off, and at the first intersection sat our house, a small home surrounded by a big yard. Stepping inside for the first time, the lack of natural light, despite there being multiple windows, was my first impression, followed by the heaviness, like walking into a room after a fight. I remember trying automatic writing early on. Had heard about it somewhere. I talked to someone named Chris. I asked if he was evil. He said yes. I thought, well, that's really on the nose, and so I put it away. I would have incredibly vivid, visceral dreams, the most realistic dreams of my own death. One still haunts me to this day. I was shot multiple times, and despite my desire to keep going, I slowly knelt behind a car, knowing I was bleeding out, running out of blood and time. I lay down on the sidewalk as a darkness crept in, clouding my vision. I didn't want to die, I knew that, but I couldn't help it. And then I did. They say you can't die in your dreams, but I did. I felt covered and sucked into the black, a void. I was terrified and spent what felt like minutes in the blackness, keenly aware of my consciousness, but just as aware that there was nothing else. I awoke in a cold sweat. I dreamed my sister was possessed with glowing red eyes and busting through my locked door with inhuman strength. It sounds stupid, but these felt just as real as anything. I kept a dream journal because I assigned some sort of significance to them and their symbols that I've long since forgotten. And of course, the damn bears, always chasing, always catching me. I've forgotten and do wonder what those had meant as well. In this home, I saw a shadowy figure at the foot of my bed. I thought it was my friend from school. It wasn't. It was something else, something dark. Yet another weird dream. I saw shapes moving along the walls in the shadows of night. My eyes playing tricks on me. Looked over one night at a ventriloquist doll sitting on a shelf and heard and watched as its mouth creaked open. Maybe I only imagined it, though. Our 2 dogs would often choose my room to sleep in. One night, in the wee hours of the morning, I woke to the smell of yet another infamous dog fart. Dobermans, am I right? "Gretchen," I hissed at her as she continued snoring away at the foot of my bed, oblivious. I looked down beside me at my Pyrenees, Sadie, laying on the floor and fully alert, staring up at me. "That one was pretty bad," she said to me. I agreed and shot Gretchen a look as she let another one loose. I turned my attention back to Sadie as she grumbled, "Ugh, here we go again." She put her paw over her nose and closed her eyes to go back to sleep. I slowly lay my head back down and stared at the ceiling as it dawned on me that dogs can't talk. The next morning, though, obviously it was just a hallucination, half awake, half asleep. It happens. My sister told me of something that put its arm around her as she lay in bed one morning, and a tall, massive, hairy creature that she saw running through the trees on 2 legs as we passed down the winding road in our car. When she looked out the back window to catch another glimpse, she says it was just gone. Didn't have an excuse for those, as she didn't tell me about them until years after we had moved. I also heard the voice of a close friend from my early childhood calling my name from the other room. I hadn't seen her in years and missed her terribly. I didn't question how she could be calling me from my kitchen. I was just excited that my friend had somehow come to surprise me with a visit, and disappointed when I looked and saw she wasn't there. Nobody was. Strange, the tricks our ears play on us. There was a moving ball of fiery light in the sky one time. I saw it walking down the road, heading back to my home from the landlord's place who lived at the other end of the flats. I watched it, thinking it was part of a comet shower. Meteor shower? Asteroid shower? I don't know what it's called, but something normal. Something explainable. I expected to read about it in the local paper, or hear people talking about it because it was so big, seemed so close. But I never saw anything about it in the paper, nor did anyone know what I was talking about when I asked them whether they had seen the same thing. One might think experiences like these would make a surefire believer of someone, a buyer intoer of all things paranormal. Quite the opposite in my case. After anything that happened, as strange as it may have been, it didn't take long for the event to be followed by long spans of nothingness, and then inevitably my dismissal that anything strange had even taken place, followed by my complete squashing of the memory entirely, filing it away into a box that would not be opened again until my mid-30s, when I would launch my show, the Paranormal Girl Podcast, all about being unbelieving and open to the paranormal, what it means, why it's possible, and how important these kinds of experiences are to the understanding of the supernatural world. I've often wondered why, when others tell me their experiences, I believe them. But my own were to be downplayed and buried, too unbelievable, obviously absurd. It's strange to me that these personal experiences lay dormant in my head until I turned my attention to learning about this world in an academic sense. I wanted to understand it, because maybe on some unconscious level, these memories begged of me to accept that what I had experienced so long ago was real. Now, decades later, I do look back with more certainty. And the weird things that happen nowadays, I don't dismiss so easily. I just allow them to come through and be what they are. The paranormal certainly has my attention now. They say what you focus on becomes your reality. I like to think that, for me, reality simply came into focus.
Thank you, Kristen, for that. Seriously, guys, if you haven't checked out Kristen's show yet, it is the Paranormal Girl Pod. She's become a pretty good friend in this whole podcast universe that we got out here. Her show is great. Every season touches on something different with the paranormal, whether it be demons, psychics, mediums. Every season has a big topic discussion, so she really deep dives into each one. So if you're into that, go check it out. This next story is read by Brother Bear.
This was sent to us from Derek from Iron City Paranormal. We've been to countless locations that have been reported as haunted or had some type of strange occurrence. Some areas are more well-known with endless stories. Others are more residential and less-known tales, where owners either want confirmation or evidence, while others want their domain cleansed. We could honestly go on and on about all the different places, but something we don't normally talk about is our origins into the paranormal, dating back to our childhood. Derek grew up in Economy Borough, just north of Pittsburgh. His backyard stretched into a plot of land untouched for years and overgrown by brush and woods, with a stream cutting through the property. These lands were once home to Native Americans who would have, no doubt, utilized the land and stream as both hunting grounds and living areas, even if simply passing through. There were numerous times when he and his friends would explore in those woods, but would see a stranger, not just one they didn't know, but one who appeared out of place and time. As he and his friends made their way back home from the first sighting, they noted to their parents that there was a creepy naked man in the woods. As their descriptions improved, it was apparent that they were detailing a Native American, complete with loincloth, moccasins, a colorful headband, and even a bow slung over his back. He had appeared to be drinking or collecting water from the stream and paid no notice to the group of friends, even though they were very loud. There was a watchful eye on those woods, starting with that occasion, with the fear of a half-naked prowler on the loose. However, this man was not seen again until the following summer, when Derek's younger siblings reported the same activity without truly being aware or privy to the knowledge of the prior summer. This strange sight was only witnessed once more by this group of friends, and that was years later, when they were in high school and used the woods as a makeshift paintball course and actually altered the landscape with scrap wood like pallets to be used as bunkers. During this minimal construction, the entire group had noticed this exact same figure, this time simply wandering the woods near the creek bed. Even though some of this group called out to him, he paid no attention and eventually disappeared into the woodland. To this day, Derek recalls this memory as one of his first paranormal experiences, although it was the furthest thing from his mind at the time. While he was growing up, Derek's father was, and still is, an avid Civil War history buff. His family would make the bi-yearly trips to Gettysburg, the small town in which a notoriously bloody and infamous battle occurred in 1863, which ultimately drew an end to the conflict and was truly as far north as the Confederacy had reached. During one of these trips, his family decided to do a boys' weekend and camped just outside of Gettysburg with the men from his extended family. One night, they illegally drove through the battlefield after sunset. While driving the familiar roads around one turn on Culp's Hill, the group spotted a statue that they'd never seen before. It appeared as an older soldier who had been beaten and bloodied and apparently retreating. This statue seemed to have a certain amount of detail and colorization, which the other old gray stoned monuments lacked. They didn't dare stop and risk getting kicked out of the park. Instead, they simply started their next day at the visitor center. The group was shocked when none of the officials or volunteers had ever heard of or seen a new monument. With a stunned confusion, the group headed back out to that exact spot where they spotted the monument the prior night. To their amazement and stupor, there was in fact nothing there. So what was it that the group saw? A former soldier retreating following his loss? Or just as possible, his death? As Derek recalled these past experiences to some others in his high school, this gained intrigue as a select group of friends decided to play ghost hunter, thanks in part to the MTV show Fear. Stories of real local haunts circulated around the area, so the small group of 3 set out for a haunted exploration. The first location was of the minimally known former township pool of Turkeyfoot. The tales claim that there was once a young boy who illegally entered the pool after dark one evening on a dare and jumped into the pool. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to the young boy, the pool had been drained earlier that week and he dove headfirst onto a hard, unforgiving concrete floor. He broke his neck and died slowly over the course of the night. The pool was closed and was being prepared for construction when the construction workers cut down a stray tree in the center of the pool. They returned the next day to fill in the pool, but in all, the full-size tree grew right back to where it once was located just a day earlier. This occurred 3 more times, and, upon further inspection, this was noted to be the exact spot where the boy had perished. As the story surfaced, the construction of the area was abandoned. The pool filled in for safety reasons, and the tree still sprouts out of the same location to this day. During our visit here, we took a simple voice recorder. With no prior experience other than watching TV and movies, the trio ventured into the field. The group spent some time here, culminating in a white misty figure which appeared off in the distance. As the group froze in their tracks, a loud whistling of a train was heard echoing through the wooded field. The trio scattered back to their car, leaving one member behind as he tripped over the entry gate. After peeling out and pulling away, the pair in the car slammed on their brakes as another car sped up the winding hill, illuminating the shining garbage can in the field portraying a whitish misty figure. The duo pulled back into the lot and picked up their fallen comrade. As they listened back to the recorder, there was nothing at all recorded on further inspection. It appeared as though the operator pressed the play button rather than record. On to their next adventure, which loomed over the hillside of Route 65 at the time, the former Dixmount State Reformatory. The building was a former insane asylum which housed both mentally and criminally insane individuals, which ultimately led to the creation of their own graveyard due to the extremely high number of deaths. Over time, ghost stories sprung up, resulting in trespassers often breaking into the building, so much so that guards were hired to protect the building and the public's safety. When the group arrived, the building was being prepared for demolition for a construction of a new Walmart, a venture which failed numerous times, sometimes blamed on the souls which were buried with the rubble. As the group sauntered up the hill, avoiding any guards that might have been watching and clearly marked explosives, one member backed out and headed back to the car. Derek and his friend approached the rusted-out, blood-red door, suddenly stopping in their tracks as trickles of blood fell before them. Derek looked over only to see his friend's nose gushing with blood, practically filling his cupped hands. The pair rushed back to the car to calm the bleeding. As they reached the car and light draped over them, they explained their rush to their third member. He looked on, confused. There was not one single drop of blood seen anywhere on the pair. Not their clothes, not their hands, not their shoes. It was as if this was more of a warning not to enter the damned building. Later on, as Derek's paranormal investigation began just as a cheap hobby, his grandparents explained some oddities which were truly close to home for him. Only 4 years before, his great-grandmother, who he was extremely close with, passed away. She spent a lot of time at his grandparents' house, and this is actually where Derek saw her at many family functions. His grandparents explained to him, knowing he had an open mind, that they had smelled his great-grandmother's perfume on occasion, even though it had not been purchased or anywhere near their home since her passing. An even stranger occurrence was explained in the form of one of her earrings being found on the staircase. They noted that it was in fact his great-grandmother's earring, and even more unsettling, it was the earring that she was buried with years before.
Could you imagine finding something that you know for a fact your relative was buried in? Ooh, goosebumps.
Right?
This next story comes from Chrissy Heron. My ex-husband, my son, and I stayed on the Queen Mary, moored in Long Beach in Los Angeles. The ship is not for those looking for all modern contemporary in their bedroom. The rooms are traditional Art Deco style, terribly old-fashioned, and a bit musty. We stayed for 2 of the 3 nights before leaving for another hotel. On arrival, the receptionist asked me several times if they could move us to another room. I can't remember why, but I was very adamant that I wanted this room. It was mid-July and the weather outside was beautiful, sunny, and warm. The ship was busy, full of all nationalities. It was so unique with such a wonderful history. We were on a 6-week holiday, and compared to all the other hotels we had stayed at during our travels to Australia, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, it was so very different. The minute we arrived in the cabin, we were surprised at how cold it was. Later that night, I called up to reception, and they didn't seem surprised when I asked for extra covers for the beds. The lad that brought them up to us said, "The bedding won't make any difference." I didn't even notice his comment, but my husband did. My son had a small room off ours. It was absolutely freezing, and he went to bed with socks and a sweater on. During the night, I was woken up with what sounded like something rustling in the basket bin over beside the television. It was loud enough to waken me up, and I genuinely thought perhaps a rat had got stuck in the bag placed in the bin. I woke my husband up, and he investigated the noise. There was nothing there. The room was so cold, and I went back to bed with socks and a sweatshirt on. Back in bed, I struggled to sleep. The television came on by itself, and I ended up sleeping with the light on. I was again woken up by the people in the room next door. There was a lot of banging and muffled noises. I thought it was very rude of them to be making so much noise at that time of night, considering it was 4 a.m. When I got up to go to the toilet, I could hear them quite clearly moving about as the toilet was directly against their wall. But I went back to bed. I never said anything in the morning as I didn't want to complain since we were only staying 3 nights. The following night, we went to bed. We watched a bit of TV and crashed out. I was woken up by my son running through into our room, upset he had had a nightmare and didn't want to sleep in that room. He was only 10 and said he could hear someone talking in the room. He made a makeshift bed on the floor and slept in with us. The room was freezing cold, and I called up to reception 3 times before someone arrived with additional quilts for the beds. Once I finally got back to sleep, I woke up with someone scratching the bottom of my foot. I sat up bolt right and screamed out to my husband, who said he was convinced he had seen a man pop his head out from the corner of the room. At 7 a.m., I was up at reception. I asked them why there was always people outside our room taking photographs. The man serving in the little kiosk told me our bedroom was next door to the one that was closed off, as it was reported as being haunted. I was not willing to stay. My husband already knew but didn't want to say anything. The people outside taking the pictures were aware of the room next door to ours, as it was on the internet and had been featured on various shows. We went back to the room, packed up, and left. I took a picture of my husband in the room doorway, and it was covered in orbs. Was I frightened? Of course. Would I go back to stay again? Absolutely not. And finally, Mr. Thor, our very loyal Doberman, died last year at the grand old age of 15. He was like Velcro. He had his ways about the house and could be verbal and noisy. He was privately cremated, and when his ashes were brought back to the house, that night all 3 of us heard him come back up the stairs, and I felt him come up onto my bed. We used to say he sounded like he had working boots on when he climbed the stairs. He loved to be in the car. His seat was the back seat. I have a picture taken recently. Friends were taking a selfie in the car, and who should appear in the picture? Mr. Thor, as clear as day. My cleaner has said she has even heard him jump up onto the leather sofa. That makes me think of your ashtray that you had from the Queen Mary and the little girl's spirit that was attached to it.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, I was actually gifted, back when I hosted Whispers, a serving tray or an ashtray of some kind from the Queen Mary. And, yeah, Sarah thought she seen something around that area. She didn't even know that I had it. But, like, she'd always say, there's something going on, in that part of your kitchen. And it turns out, it's exactly where I had that thing stashed.
And as soon as he got rid of that, I never saw that little spirit ever again.
Hey, my name is Melanie Perez, and I'm from New York originally.
Hey, Melanie.
Hey. So I got a little ghost story for you.
Okay.
It's when I was 2 years old in St. Augustine, Florida, with my Nana and my mom. We went to this little hotel that used to be like a house.
Okay.
And my grandma is more into the paranormal than my mom. My mom is mostly those who feels like something's wonky, but my Nana's the one that actually sees.
Okay.
So when I was 2,
So she
with
sees
there.
spirits.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, like just like people, and I used to as a kid too.
Oh.
That I saw one in my house. But you can't tell your mom, why is there a random man in the house? And he disappears. So my Nana was the one that used to be my big support as a kid.
Okay.
And we went to the St. Augustine one night. There was a lot of noise, a lot of kids running around, and my mom originally thought, like, whose kids are those? And I went to sleep, and I slept with my Nana that night, and I guess I had enough. I shot up, sat down, and started screaming, "You stop that right now! I'm sleeping!" Stayed there, staring very angrily at the other part of the room, and then went to sleep, and there was no more.
Right back to bed.
Yeah, right back to bed. That was it. I said my piece, and my 2-year-old self said good night. And then, and that woke up my mom. My mom's like, "What's going on?" And my Nana goes, "Oh, there's some like little kid spirits running around, but they're done now. They're gone." Just nonchalantly, my mom's like, "What?" And they actually talked to the people afterwards the next day in depth, and they're like, "Oh yeah, like there used to be a lot of children here that passed."
Oh wow.
And they got the whole story, and I'm just there like, yeah, I couldn't sleep. Like I had it in for those kids. Apparently, I talked to my mom about it, so I was very aggravated with those children. But at least they listened.
Now, when did you stop seeing them?
I stopped seeing them. Actually, it was my mom that I used to see like random stuff in the property or with my Nana. And one day I was just talking to one.
Yeah.
And like right when she opened the door, they were gone. She goes, "If you stop that if you do that one more time, I'm gonna have you like evaluated." And I'm like, "What?" And I just stopped talking to them. I would ignore them, and then it just now I'm getting back into it.
I was
But
gonna say, what if you stopped ignoring them now?
well, funny thing though, we went to someone who is like a witch, who like very paranormal, into like speaking with the dead. Didn't know anything about that, and stopped, looked at my mom, and said, "You're the reason she doesn't talk to them anymore." And my mom was like, "What?" And just went pale. Like, imagine someone randomly calls you out on something that no one, it was just her and I that knew about it. And we was like, "What?" She goes, "You're the reason. They're upset with you. You're the reason why she stopped talking to them now. And they wanted me to tell you they're upset because they liked talking to her." And she's like, "Who's they?" Right. So yeah, that was it. And my Nana used to see them just like me until then.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, this next story comes in from Mike from Extreme Paranormal. I have some experiences from where I work. I won't say where I work for privacy reasons, but it's a Fortune 500 company in Northeast Ohio. I am a security officer, and at the end of the month, I'll be the night shift sergeant. The company is quite large, and I primarily work in the operations center. We have to do a lot of foot patrols every night. The buildings are very old, 124 years old to be exact. I've seen things on camera, and while doing patrols in what we call the ICB building, I saw a person walking around. I walked a bit faster to catch up to this person. They disappeared. This happens quite a bit. I've seen the Hat Man at work and other full-body apparitions. People at work know I'm a paranormal guy and was asked, "Have you seen our ghost yet?" My response was, "Yes, I have." My company has its own police and fire department. I've been told that both departments are afraid to go there. They refuse because of the ghosts. One former employee in manufacturing stays around because he loves his job, and he died while working. I've never come across a bad ghost, only friendly ones. Mike. This next story comes in from friend of the show, Jose Gonzalez.
Good evening and happy Halloween. This is Jose from Paranormal Hunting Observation Group FOG here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. As promised, I'm sharing a Halloween story of mine with my good friend Jordan Cline here on Fireside Paranormal Podcast. I'm going to be reading from a book called Haunted Cheyenne by my good friend Jill Pope, author and paranormal researcher. We've done a lot of work throughout the years, and I'm very grateful for my friend in recording some of our research and some of my personal stories. So let's get right to it. This is from chapter 37 called Darkness Within Darkness, East 5th Street. Jose is a member of FOG, the paranormal investigation group that I have spoken of throughout this book. He is a kind soul who was raised with a strict Catholic upbringing. The maternal side of his family is Yaqui Native American. His grandfather was a native shaman, curandero, or healer. This spiritual intuitive healing has carried down through the generations. Jose works in the medical field, carrying on the healing, and is sensitive to his patients' needs, as well as the spiritual energies that surround us all. He has had the ability to see things that others can't since he was 3 years old. The Yaqui people originated in northern Mexico. They have interwoven their native healing culture with Roman Catholic beliefs. When I met Jose, he said he got into paranormal investigations because some intense things happened in his home growing up. I took that in stride until recently when he told me the specifics of these encounters. The things his family experienced are the most intense that I have been told of. Many of you may be skeptical of these accounts. All I can say is that Jose expressed genuine emotion while sharing his life story. He feels his faith got him through it. As a child, his family suffered many hardships. He and his brother were raised by their father. He was a good man, firm in his beliefs, who struggled with tribulations of severe diabetes, including blindness. This forced Jose to take on a lot of adult responsibilities at a young age. The family was close and relied on their faith to get them through some difficult times. They lived in a small house on 5th Street, having moved there in 1981 when Jose was 11. The two boys each had a bedroom in the basement. It was here that they were tormented by something quite evil. The first time Jose encountered this entity, he had rushed down into the basement without flipping the light switch on at the top of the steps. It was really dark down there without lights. And there were no light switches at the base of the stairs. He called out to his kid brother to turn them on for him, and about that time, he heard a menacing growl sound in his ear that he likened to a motorcycle being revved. He felt cold on the back of his neck. Filled with fear, he wondered how you could see darkness within darkness. He kicked into his fight-or-flight mode, bolting up the stairs through the house and rushing out the front door and outside to his father. He was screaming for help and was petrified. When they cautiously went into the home, they found their television volume was turned up full blast and the screen was white snow. His father and a friend searched the house and blessed each room with holy water. Jose did not sleep downstairs for a couple nights. Jose said a relative brought a Ouija board over one night. He was surprised his dad allowed it. They messed around with it for a while, asking questions, the planchette gliding across the board in response. Jose is afraid it may have opened up something because that is when a lot of the malevolent spirit phenomena began. Many people theorize that spirits thrive on energy, which is why batteries are often drained when spirits are present. Jose feels that with all the burdens stemming from his father's diabetes and blindness, that there was a lot of frustration and anger in the home, which fed their dark entity. Fear breeds fear. Jose would see shadow figures night and day. One night, he felt a big, strong hand shove him down on his bed. Another day, he was hanging out in his brother's room watching a basketball game on his television. The reception was not coming in well, and annoyed, he hit the side of the TV. When he did that, he began hearing the growl again. He would hear it on one side, and then suddenly it was on his other side. It kept bouncing around him, and he did not know where it was from moment to moment. It was terrifying. He prayed his way out of the room. His father had a guide dog named Colonel to assist him due to his blindness. Colonel was a big black lab. One day when everyone was hanging out upstairs, there was a big crashing sound coming from the basement, as though something had broken. Colonel raced up to the top of the stairs and growled but refused to go downstairs. When they finally did go downstairs, they did not find anything broken and could not figure out what caused the loud noise. Over the years, many of their friends and family members have experienced spiritual phenomena in the home. Perhaps one of the scariest events happened to Jose's brother. He was downstairs in his bedroom sleeping. The stairwell was beside his room, and it had the typical storage space under the stairs. During this blood-curdling experience, he swore that a wolf-like creature with red eyes crept out of the storage area and was growling and stalking him, seeking vengeance from beyond. Jose's father passed away while he was finishing high school. Jose inherited the haunted home. One night, he had a group of friends hanging out. A couple of them were tired and they crashed. All of a sudden, they came flying into the kitchen. They had both encountered something that they felt next to their heads, and they heard it say, "Hey, babe." One afternoon, Jose was outside with a couple of his friends were in the house, and when he came back in, they were all crouched up on the couch, acting hysterical. They had felt something moving around and touching their legs, preying on them. One night, some of the guys hit the tequila. Jose saw a short creature, but not a child, in the hallway. Because he had been drinking, he didn't say anything. The next morning, one of the guys said, "Wow, that tequila must have really messed with me. I kept thinking I saw a little man in the hall." The other two guys were astonished because they had all seen this little man-like creature too. As they compared notes, they had all seen the exact same thing, tequila or not. They said that he had some transparency to him. One day, Jose's cousin was over. He had never believed in ghosts until he spent time alone in the basement. He prayed for Colonel to come rescue him when he saw one of the shadow people that Jose so often encountered. Colonel did come to his aid, escorting him out of the basement. Eventually, Jose sold the house. He took several photos before he moved out. The photos were full of orbs. He spoke to the new owner a while later, and he too was having paranormal activity. I find the paranormal very intriguing, and curiosity is the main reason I take such an interest in spirits. That is not the case for Jose. His main objective is to learn and understand the paranormal so that he can help people who live in fear as he did. Thanks for listening tonight. I hope you guys are having a good time with your family, friends, wherever you may be. Please continue to show unconditional love for each other and minimize the fear out there. Please stay happy, healthy, and safe wherever you are. And thank you for allowing me to take time to share some of my personal stories with you. And it was well written by my friend Jill. And thanks to Jordan. You guys take care and God bless. We'll talk again. Don't forget, enter the fog.
All right, that does it for this year's Halloween episode.
It has been such an awesome time getting to read your stories, listen to them, and share them with everybody.
I really do appreciate every single one of you. And like I say with every show, if you haven't had the opportunity yet to connect with me on social media, Fireside Paranormal Hub on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter at Fireside Parapod, Parapod. Make sure you check out that Patreon. If you haven't joined the Patreon yet, you're missing out on something fun. It's patreon.com/Fireside Paranormal and the website
FiresideParanormal.com.
And you can get that sweet, sweet Fireside merch.
Send in some ideas for some new merch. We kind of hit a wall with that.
Yeah, if you got any ideas for shirts, anything you'd like to see on there, we can throw it together for you. Be safe out there this Halloween. If you are out on the roads, walking with your kiddos or visiting things that go bump in the night, just make sure you're safe and smart about it. Luckily, here at Fireside Paranormal, spooky season doesn't end with Halloween. We have fun things planned out for the rest of this year and some exciting things for next year as well. But this is all we have for this week. So until next week, everybody, don't be afraid, only believe.